Years since the disappearance and death of Scott County teenager Shondra May.
Brutally murdered about 30 years ago, and since then the case has gone cold. But now a new strategy may help find the person or people responsible.
From the mystery of a missing person to one of the most brutal and stark murders after being abducted, this case has remained unresolved for more than 35 years. On the other hand, given the absence of concrete proof sufficient to indict a suspect, the issue is still as unresolved as it was in the early hours following her kidnapping. But what exactly happened to Shondra May? And what is the actual cause of her death? Join us as we unravel the unsolved cold case of Shondra May in 1986. This is Unsolved Files, a place where true crime stories are being brought to your doorstep. What are you waiting for? Just hit the subscribe button for more intriguing and suspense-filled crime stories. Now, let's get back into this story and uncover this mystery. Shondra May, a 17-year-old from central Mississippi, vanished from sight during her shift at McDonald's in 1986. On February 4th, 1986, the sky over central Mississippi was filled with the dank, bitter winter's chill. In the city of Forest, the county seat of Scott County, it was not a particularly significant day, but in a little while it would be. The day's events would, by late evening, set off a mystery that remains unexplained for 35 years later. On this fateful day, this small town in rural central Mississippi would be called the home of rape, murder, and mystery. Shondra May, a 17-year-old high school student, resided in the unincorporated village of Pea Ridge, Scott County, with her parents, adoptive brother Tim, and herself. Pea Ridge is essentially a little neighborhood off the main highway that is home to a small number of people. Nonetheless, it was situated close to the southern boundary of Lake County, which is close to northern Scott County, off Highway 35 North. Richard, who happens to be Shondra's father, piloted riverboats on the Mississippi River. Richard, however, was frequently away from home due to work up and down the river, so Shondra's mother, Janelle, took on the role of caring for Shondra and her brother. Janelle had, by every indication, fulfilled her responsibility of maintaining a positive home environment, and Shondra was a decent and considerable person, according to her friends. Shondra May was a student at Leake Academy, a private educational institution situated in the Madden, Mississippi, 14-meter drive neighborhood adjacent to her residence in Leake County. At that time of the year, Shondra was a senior, and her graduation was approaching in less than a few months. During the winter months of 1986, Shondra adhered to her daily academy class schedule. Following class, she would return to her residence in Pea Ridge and travel 13 miles to the south to the town of Forest. In order to supplement her income, she worked at a McDonald's restaurant in the neighborhood, primarily during the evenings and weekends. According to the testimony of the witnesses, Shondra had attended her school classes on February 4th in the morning. As Shondra reported for work at McDonald's at approximately 6 o'clock in the evening, she was completely oblivious to the fact that the precious final hours of her young life were about to pass. However, in the year 1986, the population of Forest, Mississippi, was slightly higher than 5,000 people, and the surrounding area of Scott County was getting close to 20,000 people at that time. The fact that Forest, a small town in Mississippi, now had a McDonald's franchise in the area was a positive development for the community. This was most likely due to the fact that Interstate Highway 20 traveled from east to west, which is just south of the small town, and that made it possible for a potential pull to the fast food outlet. In addition, it appears that for a few young kids in the region, it was also an opportunity to work part-time and earn a little money in the process. Shondra was one of the fortunate ones, but she was clocking in for her final night on the job. It was a Tuesday, and it was a very sluggish day, with only a small amount of evening traffic passing through the fast food outlet. Because it was a very chilly, wet, and rainy night, it appeared that people were staying inside and not going out. The delayed client traffic caused Shondra to clock out at 7:24 p.m., which was a result of the slow customer traffic. For a while, she remained in the vicinity of the restaurant in the expectation that the number of customers would increase. At approximately 7:40 p.m., she finally gave up and made the decision to go, which was the last time anyone in the restaurant would see the young blonde with hazy eyes alive. Just before she left, she made a phone call to her mother using the phone that was provided at the restaurant. She informed her that she was on her way home. Shondra couldn't have any way of knowing that she would never make it there. Janelle, Shondra's mother, got anxious when she returned home and discovered that her daughter had not yet arrived. She had been away from Forest for a considerable amount of time, and it was too late for her to make the journey. During this time, Shondra's father, Richard, contacted her, and Janelle voiced her concerns about the situation. To determine whether or not Shondra had experienced any issues with her vehicle, Richard gave Janelle the instruction to get in touch with Shondra's uncle and have him drive the route. Instantly, this was the moment when the search began to yield good results. When Janelle opened the front door of the house, she saw Shondra's car packed along the road, less than 100 miles away from the house. However, while searching the car, there was no trace of Shondra. Her purse and other things were found in the car, all of which appeared to be unharmed and unaltered. After conducting a thorough investigation of her purse, it was discovered that Shondra's driver's license was missing from the customary and organized inventory. There was no evidence of Shondra forcefully leaving the car through the driver's door, which was ajar. We were unable to locate her anywhere. However, the item that Shondra had in her possession was a receipt for a Valentine's Day card that she had purchased from a Woodland variety store, but the card itself was nowhere to be found. Shondra had left McDonald's in her 1985 Isuzu M-Mark, where she made an initial visit at a nearby TG before proceeding to the variety store located in Forest. She made the detour in anticipation of the forthcoming Valentina's Day on the 14th of February, during which she acquired an overseas Valentina's card. Meanwhile, friends and acquaintances hypothesized that the card belonged to her boyfriend, Tony Adams, a 19-year-old boy who resided in Edinburgh, Mississippi, situated 27 miles northeast of Shondra's residence, as testified by witnesses who recalled her presence in the store that evening. During that period, Adams was a student at Edinburgh High School. In response to the search, Scott County law enforcement was activated. Investigators from the MBI, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, and FBI ultimately joined the effort to provide a positive result. Gradually, the mystery surrounding the whereabouts of the absent young girl came into focus. The car lacked useful evidence, as there were no indications of forced entry or struggle. It appeared as though Shondra had arrived at a location visible from her residence and subsequently vanished without a trace. As soon as the news of Shondra's disappearance spread throughout the neighboring counties by morning, fear quickly took over the small town. Posters that had a picture of the cheerful Shondra quickly gained widespread distribution across various surfaces, including storefront windows, shop counters, bulletin boards, and telephone polling. Fortunately, thousands of individuals were diligently searching for the young girl who had vanished without a trace from her very front yard. Just as the case is with the majority of missing persons, law enforcement agencies do not consider Shondra's disappearance a missing persons case until at least 48 hours have elapsed. The parking location of the vehicle was never treated as a crime scene in terms of tire traces or footprint preservation, and the vehicle was never dusted with fingerprints. Before law enforcement arrived, her relatives had moved the vehicle from the scene of its discovery to the house. Before any decision could be made regarding this investigation, a lot of footprints had already contaminated the area of the crime scene. Unfortunately, this resulted in the loss of crucial evidence that could have potentially facilitated subsequent developments. False leads and rumors began to circulate, ultimately resulting in dead ends. Nevertheless, as March and spring approached, the events of February 1986 transpired moment by moment. As each passing day rolled by, so did the hope regarding the whereabouts of Shondra fade away. However, the situation and failed investigation with minimal change lasted for 22 extended days until they took a break from the case. The case was shifted from that of a mysteriously missing person to that of a heinous and brutal murder. As Shondra's 18th birthday approached on February 26, 1986, the situation only grew worse for her family and friends. On the morning of February 26th, off-duty firefighters on a hunting expedition encountered a suspicious object floating in the frigid waters of Baker Creek near the town of Bolton, Mississippi. The creek was close to Interstate Highway 20 and a bridge crossing on Champion Hill Road. Apparently, the firefighter notified the authorities, who subsequently arrived at the location and extracted the enigmatic object from the creek while retrieving the black plastic garbage sacks that had encased it. About 80 miles away from Shondra May's home, investigators found her deteriorated remains. Nevertheless, investigation techniques and safeguards at crime scenes have not yet reached their maximum potential. However, DNA technology was still in its infancy when authorities examined tainted evidence at the murder site of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman during the infamous O.J. Simpson trial in the mid-1990s. While removing and investigating the remains of Shondra after it was removed from the creek waters, some evidence may have been contaminated or lost at the scene. The existence of any DNA that may have been extracted during that period remains unknown. The saying, "As one door closes, another opens," began to manifest itself as a true reality in the situation involving Shondra May. The medical examiner determined, upon examining Shondra's remains, that she had been restrained and gagged with packing tape, a material frequently used in poultry processing and rearing facilities in the area where she resided. What really happened to her? Who might have committed this hideous crime? Following the inconclusive outcomes of the initial autopsy, a second autopsy, conducted by an alternative source, was commissioned. The examination determined that strangulation was the cause of death. Additionally, in her neck region, there were marks of strangulation repeatedly found, as well as signs suggesting sexual assault. The length of time the corpse had been submerged in the water was cited as the reason for the uncertainty regarding the time of death. According to the examiner's estimates, Shondra may have survived the kidnapping for a maximum of 17 to 19 days, and her body may have remained submerged in water for 3 to 5 days after her passing. Additionally, speculations arose regarding the potential exposure of the body to refrigeration. Shondra's whereabouts ceased to be a mystery. The inquiries shifted to the motives and perpetrators behind her demise. As the investigation progressed, numerous suspects, including Shondra's father and her partner, Tony Adams, were arrested as suspects, but ultimately acquitted following more comprehensive inquiries. There were speculations that a person renowned for impersonating a police officer in the vicinity of Meridian, Mississippi, might have been implicated. However, substantial evidence was not obtainable to back this claim. Even though numerous suspects were considered, no significant progress was made in locating the murderer. However, members of the local police force went through polygraph examinations to uncover any potential suspects who may have been concealed within the system. In August 1992, Richard was subsequently arrested in a Missouri prison, where he was transported back to Hinds County, Mississippi, to face interrogation concerning the death of Shondra May. In 1987 and 1988, Weeks was incarcerated in the Scott and Bolivar County jails on accusations of forgery. Although there was initial optimism regarding the possibility of a breakthrough in the case, his interrogation failed to yield any additional evidence. The Tuscaloosa News of Alabama published an article on March 2, 1993, that examined possible associations with Kenneth McClan, a suspect who was charged with the murder of Lori Hill, a resident of Ellisville, Mississippi, in February 1993. She was initially pregnant and was 18 years old at the time of her homicide. It was reported that McClan stopped Miss Hill under the disguise of a police officer. Ms. Hill was suffocated to death, and the remains were disposed of in a landfill. Tuscaloosa police had also questioned McClan in connection with the murder of 24-year-old Shonda Failer. However, charges were subsequently withdrawn against McClan, a resident of Brandon, Mississippi, for the Lore Hill murder on the grounds of insufficient evidence. Although the cases of Shondra May and Shonda Failer shared several similarities, there was insufficient evidence to establish a direct connection between the two and Kenneth McClan. In the same way, Shonda Failer vanished after she departed from the Riverside swimming pool facility. On June 10, 1987, the police discovered her vehicle, which was still parked in the facility's lot, with the driver's door slightly ajar, the interior light on, and her purse and wallet exposed on the passenger seat. 4 days later, her remains were discovered floating in the Blackwater River. The body was wedged with a concrete cinder block in the water. However, its weight was inadequate to prevent it from free floating. Her wrists and ankles were bound with wire, and her body was nude. The actual cause of the death was drowning. In both the Failer and May cases, evidentiary material was neglected, erroneously processed, or disregarded. Additionally, the duration of the body's exposure to water hampered the collection of crucial evidence in the case. McClan was interrogated regarding the Failer investigation, but was never charged. Nonetheless, reporters from the Clarion Ledger, a newspaper based in Jackson, Mississippi, endeavored to interrogate McClan. However, McClan terminated the interview when the questioning shifted to Shondra's case, and he refused to respond, invoking his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights with the assistance of his attorney. Despite the lack of concrete evidence supporting a grand jury indictment in the May or Failer instances, McClan continues to be a highly sought-after suspect. there have been 2 more murder cases in central Mississippi in 2001 and 2005 that may be related to the May case. The remains of Moosey Box, a resident of the Forkville region, were discovered in Rankin County, Mississippi, following his murder in 2001. But why is Mississippi rife with horrific murders? Sidney Jones was killed in 2005, and her body was found not far from Morton, which is in Scott County and situated between Forest and Jackson. Authorities may believe there are some connections between these crimes and the May case. However, there is currently no comprehensive information available online about these cases. Even though, by 2001, investigation methods and evidence preservation had undoubtedly advanced, both cases remained unresolved. Shondra's case is still open to this day. Over 35 years have passed since Shondra was kidnapped and killed in those chilly, wet February days, and many theories have been made about why and how she fell prey to this heinous scheme. However, in the absence of concrete proof that would enable an indictment against a suspect, the case is still as unsolved as it was in the early hours following her kidnapping. However, certain aspects of this case indicate certain ways based on the evidence, or lack thereof, in and around Shondra's car. It is possible to conclude that she either recognized her kidnapper or suspected them to be a member of law enforcement. Moreover, there were no obvious indications of a struggle, and nothing was jumbled. The area around the driver's door was devoid of any footprints that Shondra might have left when she got out of the car or as someone approached. Furthermore, no additional footprints were mentioned in the evidence, which suggests that the rain softened the ground surrounding the car. Because the location was not preserved as a crime scene at the time, it is unknown if there were any footprints or tire markings. One clue to what might have happened is that Shondra's driver's license was missing from her purse. For instance, it might just be a coincidence that a malicious person acting as a law enforcement official could have conducted a traffic stop at the same moment. It's also possible that she used the license as identification earlier to write a check, which she then tucked into the pocket of her clothes. If Shondra was being stopped by the authorities, why would she choose to stop less than 100 miles short of her home, rather than risk her safety by just pulling up in front of the house? Whatever the situation may be, it was evident that she did not feel threatened. However, in the unlikely event that someone with a good conscience comes up to confess, the Shondra case is unlikely to remain unsolved. However, retired murder detectives are still working on the case, even in the absence of preserved DNA evidence. Meanwhile, a great number of people who were horrified and shocked by this tragedy, along with Shondra's family, friends, and co-workers, will spend a significant portion of their lives constantly revisiting their memories of that chilly February in 1986 in Mississippi, in addition to remembering Shondra. This is indeed an unsolved criminal investigation that remains open, pending the discovery of new evidence. The killer might still be out there, spreading more evil in the city. We can never tell. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comment section below. And what if I told you that a man actually killed his wife out of jealousy? Check that out in our previous video, The Chilling Case of Kira Steger.